Welcome once again to Dave Space Vintage Computing. Coronavirus Self-Isolation Edition. Today, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to this Model 4P. What you're looking at here is FRED. Now, I don't go about naming PC parts just for fun. FRED stands for FreHD, or FRED for short. It essentially is an SD card reader for the TRS-80 Model 3 and 4 computers. I got this one from, let me give a shout out to Ian Maverick of Australia, who not only makes these, but he sells the kits to do various upgrades. So what I want to do with my Model 4P is turn it into the laptop, or turn it into the luggable computer that it never actually was. Radio Shack never really did offer an internal hard drive option for the Model 4P, but because we can have a large SD card, and in fact this one is, how much? This is just a 4 gigabyte one, I think. Yeah, this is a 4 gigabyte one, and trust me, 4 gigabytes is more than enough to cover the entire library of TRS-80 Model 3 and 4 software. 1, 3, and 4 I should say, because the Model 1 runs a lot of the same software too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this floppy drive. Then I'm going to put in this FRED. And right here we have the 50-pin cable, which I'm going to attach to the back, but I'm going to reroute it up through the back of the computer. But in order to get FRED to work, usually you pop a floppy in that has the software that tells the TRS-80 that there's an actual device in there that has the SD card. But because this is a luggable computer, and you don't want to have to drag all these parts around and have to boot off the floppy, which, let's face it, at 30 years old, you don't know how much longer it has to last. But Ian Maverick gave me this ROM chip. It is a replacement for the ROM chip that's on the Model 4P's motherboard that lets it auto boot from this, so that it's essentially a luggable computer with a built-in hard drive. And that's what I'm going to do today. So some people may be curious as to why I wanted to upgrade and enhance the old TRS-80 Model 4. After all, there are plenty of other more useful portable computers out there. Mainly to just, my answer is mainly to just keep it alive and to have all that, software available on a medium that's not going to disintegrate over time as badly as floppy disks. So the other thing, obviously, though, is just how much easier this thing is to transport around. Here we have the lineup. We have the whole lineup of portable computers circa 1984. We have the K-Pro 2 on the bottom here. And then we have a compact portable here. And then we have the even more gigantic IBM portable. These two were PC compatible. They basically ran virtually all IBM software, or all MS-DOS software that was made for the IBM PC 5150. Whereas the K-Pro was a CPM machine, and it ran most CPM software, as well as software that was written specifically for the K-Pro. The TRS-80, as you can see, is quite literally about half the size of the other computers. It has a much larger screen too. If you look, this screen appears to be an inch or two larger. But because of the half-height floppy drives, it's able to fit the same amount of devices as these are. It's a plastic case. It's all plastic. It's got metal shielding inside, but it ends up being a lot lighter than these steel behemoths. Alright, so here's the Model 4P on the bench. I've partially already gone through the disassembly of it, but I'll make a few pointers. I just reassembled it roughly and just want to, point out how to get the cover off. We got 2 screws here, and there are 2 screws in the exact same place on the other side. When those are off, you need to remove the handle. The screws for the handle are right there, so you have to pull the handle up and then unscrew them from outside. Once the screws are undone, you can basically just remove it and set it aside. Once the handle and those 4 screws are gone, you can take the cover off. And there it is. So I'm just going to flip this over so you can see the floppy drive assembly. So now that the back's off, I've noticed this little cable here. It looks like it's attached to one of these floppy drives. And what I believe is that somebody who previously owned this had a FRED of their own, and that since this is coming out the back, they just had this thing. They had this thing probably in a box a little more like this, where it was totally enclosed, and they would just plug it in and plug in the ribbon cable here to the interface in the back, and then in there, and then that's what they did. So this was basically just a power cord to operate one of these. And what I'm going to do is I'll probably just leave this in here just like it is, but I'll reroute it to where the floppy bay is, because it just makes more sense. To remove the floppy bay, there is a screw here, 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 and here. I've removed them already. There's also a screw here, and in this little crevice, and you're going to have to get some kind of little grabber type thing to to get to the screws. But in this little crevice, let me get some light. You can see there are the 2 screw holes right there. You have to remove those to get the floppy drive cage out. They're not that difficult to remove. You just need a long enough screwdriver and something to grab them with, unless your screwdriver, of course, is magnetic, in which case you're all set. I also forgot to mention that you also have to remove these 2 giant screws. They go here and here. They're attached to the plastic outside case. So once you do that, as you can see, the floppy drive bay is loose. But to make things easy, I'm just going to detach all these cables here, because, man, there's a lot of them. There we go. So now I'm ready. Let me just pull this out. And there we go. So now I'm going to work with the floppy drive bay. Since this was pretty much already well into the PC era when this came out. All of the screws for the floppy drives are pretty standard, and as you can guess, there's 2 on top, 2 on the bottom for each floppy drive. So I'm just going to get these off and flip it over. So this is a little bit tight, but it did come out. I'm going to keep this for some potential future project because this is the top. And the top of the floppy drive is there, so I'm just making sure everything is all, done the right way. And there we go. So I'll just put the screws in, and then we'll work on taking the next piece off. So one word of advice, which I just discovered while putting this together, you definitely want to put the cables on before you mount the FreHD into the drive bay. By the way, this plastic drive bay is just a standard 3.5 inch drive adapter for a 5 1/4 inch bay. They are available everywhere, and I just had to drill a couple of holes to mount the FreHD into it. I just used standard drill and all that, but you gotta put the cable into it. In fact, I'm also gonna put the other cable into it as well, because since it sits like here, and since there's just no way you can get your fingers all the way in there to attach this. So attaching this now is a great idea. So that's my bit of advice for putting this together. Alright, so here is FreHD with both the power cord and the ribbon cable connected. It's going to go in like this. So I'm just pulling these cables from the rear while I put it in its place. And it goes like that. So let me just make sure nothing's grabbing anything on the inside here. We're all set. And so I'm gonna be putting my screws in here and one underside right there. So here's the finished drive assembly. I've got the power cord and the ribbon cable coming out there, and we're ready to we still have more stuff to disassemble. This was just easy to get to because it's the first thing that you can remove. So the next stage is removing, basically getting under the main shield so you can get to the other parts like the power supply and the motherboard. Okay, so to take the back off, we have to remove this, here, 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 and here. There's basically 9 screws. And you have to be a little careful. The power supply is actually attached to this. So just make sure that you don't accidentally touch any of the leads on that. But here's a good look inside the TRS 80 Model 4. We haven't even gotten to the circuit board yet. So we have this is the monitor power supply here. This is the computer's power supply here. There's the monitor. Do not touch any of that unless you need to fix it. And if you need to fix it, you'll definitely want to read up on how to do it, because high voltage, extreme hazard. The same here, although I would say less so, but it has capacitors. It can zap the crap out of you. And I don't mean really strong carpet shocks, I mean like burny, skin hurty type things. So I just want to point out something I found while taking this apart. This cable, which I was going to reuse and reroute, it was literally, it's not even, it's a splice, it's not even soldered, and it looks like it may actually be wired wrong, but I just didn't like all the fraying electrical tape that was on here, so I'm just gonna remove this thing here, this, you know, I'm just gonna remove this, keep it as, you know, keep it the way it was. I might put some heat shrink wrap on the existing connectors after I just solder them to make sure they're going to remain solid, and that's, I'm going to go with the existing connector, although technically, yeah, if I do things right, I probably don't even need to do anything more than just cut these extra pieces off, but that's what I'm going to do. It's too complicated for me to hold the camera and do it, so anyway, you'll see the finished results. Say hello to my little friend. This is a heat gun. I've had this around for ages, and I've never actually used it until today. I wanted to, let me just pause this. So I removed that connector that the guy had spliced on, because it kind of was a poor slice job, or splicing job, and although I admire the guy's wire wrapping technique, I just didn't trust the connection, because the electrical tape, I mean, it's like it's all coming apart, it's not sticking anymore. I just didn't trust it, but I realized I really don't need to have both floppy connectors, because the connector that comes with the Fred kit will plug into this, and then it will actually have a second floppy drive connector anyway. So it's, you know, I'll have plenty of connectors. But so what I did is the reason I love my heat gun is I put this heat shrink tape on everything after I took it all apart, and the heat gun was such that it was, you know, after a few seconds it starts smoking. I mean, I'm literally shooting smoke at everything after a while. But the one thing I can say about it is this this Drill Master heat gun from Harbor Freight. It's not just a glorified blow dryer. This is a melt the skin off of your bones heat gun. It's super fast, super hot, and it works, you know, for doing heat shrink stuff. It works like a charm. Alright, so to get the back off, you take these screws out, these two screws here, this, that, and you should be able to basically just easily lift that whole thing off, revealing the internal organs of the 4P. So what I'm going to show you before I get to the next part is, eventually this cable here, this is the 50-pin connector that connects the FreHD or Fred to this 50-pin bus here. Eventually what it's going to be is this is going to be plugged in like this. What's going to happen is I'm going to fold this like this, and then it's going to flip over somehow. I'm going to have to, it's probably going to go like this, and then I'm going to run it back through that drive bay. There's a place right about here, actually right here. It has to basically stay above this little point here because there's a couple of screws that go in there to hold the side together. But eventually this cable is just going to run like that through there, and it'll be a permanent fixture. But for now, though, we have to access the main board. Alright, so to free the motherboard, there's a screw here that I removed, there and there. We want to leave the bottom one in, however, because you'll see in a second. So on the other side, we take this screw out, leave this one in, and take that one out. And again, leave the bottom screw in. And I'll show you why. Because, oh yeah, you'll want to disconnect the floppy cable from the motherboard before you do this. So this is the reason why. It just slides out like that. You can access the motherboard like that. It's real simple, but we're going to be going a little further because I believe that, yeah, we're going to have to put the board back in. Actually, we're going to have to take the bottom screws out and unplug these plugs here on the motherboard because things aren't going to allow us to flip this down all the way. You know, there's stuff keeping us from doing that, which you know, if this were a different operation, because on this operation I've actually got to remove this whole motherboard from the unit because I have to do a wire on the back. But under normal situations where you have to upgrade the ROM or replace, you know, upgrade the RAM, all of that can be done, you know, with this sort of flip out type thing. But we're going to be going a little further than that. So these connectors here were a lot more trouble than I thought they'd be. They were in there really tight, and it was difficult to remove them. So I'm thinking that quite possibly we do need to take, you know, if there is a next time, we would probably want to take a few more things apart to make it easier to access, but I'm not sure exactly what I would do. So the last thing here is we gotta remove the keyboard connector, and that we'll just leave that there because what we're going to do is we're going to remove these screws, all of these big silver screws hold down the motherboard, and we're just going to remove those because this is the ROM I want to replace with the other one, and then I have to route a wire through a hole and attach it to the underside of the motherboard. If I had the version of this motherboard that's known as the gate array, or the non-gate array version, this is the gate array version. Not Gatorade, gate array. But on this version of the motherboard, I actually have to do the wiring. On the non-gate array version, you've literally just put all you do is put that chip, put the replacement chip in, and you're all set, or the replacement ROM. I wish it was the other version, but well, this is what I got. There's no way to tell until you open it up. So that's that. So I've just removed all those screws, and we're now ready to flip up the motherboard. So as I said, this is the gate array version, which means I have to replace this ROM chip with the one that I was provided, and then I have to route a wire through that hole there to the underside of the motherboard, and then down over to here somewhere. I say somewhere because the exact location is in the instructions. Right here, as a matter of fact. I've got, these are supplied by Mr. Maverick. They're very detailed with color photographs of everything. So it's going to look kind of like that. And on the underside of the motherboard, the wire comes through the hole and over to that location there. And that's the only soldering that I will have to do. Mr. Maverick has basically done most of the work for me, which is great. It's well worth it. So with that, I'll skip to the next part. So if you're unfamiliar with how chips are installed and everything, you'll note that all of the chips on this motherboard, they have a little notch in them. The notches are all aligned in the same direction. And this is kind of on purpose because it basically gives you the clue of exactly how to, which direction to insert the chips in. So you can see there's a notch on the socket as well. If you're lucky, motherboards are going to be socketed. And in this case, they pretty much all used to be back then. So I'm going to get that ROM chip out. Alright, so this is basically going to go right there. And then this cable or wire is going to go through that hole. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. And there we go. So now I have to work on soldering that to the correct pin, and I'll be right back. This is what I have to deal with every day. Cat butt near my face. And there is the one solder joint that I had to make, just to that pin 8, was it 14 or 18? I think it said, yeah, pin 18 on here. Pin 1 is at the top here, and pin 18 is right there. So this is like 1 to 12. And then 13 to 24, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, or maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, that's exactly where it is in the instructions, and I'm going to go with that. So I just wanted to point out for this operation, before we close the case, I need to figure out a simple way to keep these wires away from that fan right there. I think I'll probably just use a couple of zip ties to keep everything out of the way. Otherwise, it looks like it's a success. I've put everything back together again. I didn't want to bore you with the constant insertion and twisting of screws, but here we go, moment of truth. And the floppy disk is out, the SD card is in. Ooh! Seeking the floppy drive. Oh yes! Frickin' A, man. I don't know what this menu... Oh, I see. Different operating systems. Where's Tristos? Well, I guess I'm going to go with LS-DOS since I knew that from before. Wow! I'm surprised. Wow, this is great. I am now I now have a essentially a hard drive driven TRS 80 without all that extra bulk. This is basically, oh wow, this is everything that's on the drive. There's multiple partitions on it. I'm surprised that there wasn't a Tristos on this. Tristos was where most of my software was, or what most of my software was under. So let's see, this must be, let's see, LDOS 3 games, I think. Advent, Alien, Arma, Astro. Oh crap! This is already loaded. Black Hole Bomber. Let's see if I can find something I know. Oh God. Donkey Galaxy. I'm gonna go with Galaxy, I guess. Or Invade. Cool. So, yes, now I can transport my old games wherever I want. Well, this is great. Again, thanks to Ian Maverick for supplying the Fred and the ROM chip. He's pretty much documented everything about all this stuff, and it's rather well documented, and I highly recommend, even if you think it's too expensive to get something from Australia, I think that getting the Fred and the ROM from him is great. The other thing is, if you have a TRS-80 Model 3 or a TRS-80 regular Model 4 or a TRS-80 Model 1, there are options for you to basically hook Fred up. Let me just change the light. So basically this is what it looks like. You know, you got your old floppy drive here and Fred there, and there's your little SD card. You have the lights. I've only seen the green light go on. I haven't read the instructions yet, so I'm not too sure where what the red light's for. But the green light goes on whenever there's activity reading the SD card. And by the way, it comes with a CD that you can put onto your PC that essentially gives you utilities so that you can load this SD card up on your PC so that you don't have to do a slower conversion process, because the conversion process for the files is like one file at a time. Let me just get this. This is Ian Maverick's business card. Come on, focus. Focus. I could always put it in the description too, but thanks for participating and watching this video. I'll put all this info from Ian into the product description. I mean, into the video description below. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this fabulous crap from the past. This has been Dave Space Retro Computing Crapola.